Hello and welcome back to another edition of the App Service Community Stand-Up. My name is Byron Tardif. I'm your host. And today we're going to be talking all about JBOSS apps on App Service. And for that, we have Denver with us. Denver, you want to give a little intro?
Sure, yeah. My name is Denver Brittain. I'm here on the App Service team with Byron, product management, and for specifically Java on App Service. All things Java, whether it's Java SE, JBOSS EAP on App Service, Tomcat on App Service, anything Java related that can run on App Service.
Awesome, thank you, Denver. And we're going to be seeing a lot more of you because you're helping me out being the producer for the Community Stand-Up series, right? So thanks for joining us, and thanks for coming on board on this thing.
I'll be around.
Yeah, so usually we start this out by showing some of the things that are new and recent to the portal in case you haven't seen them or missed them. So we're going to start with that, and today we're going to talk about this new thing that everybody played with. App Service has gone through the create experience, but we added the option to create a database in line with your application. So for that to work, I need to basically come here and make sure that I'm creating a new App Service plan. And then I'll get the option to create a database in Flow. And you can see that we have all of the different database engines that we support. And the good thing about doing it this way is it gives you a secure by default posture. So the app and the database are both going to be configured into a VNet. We do all of the networking configuration so that your app is the only thing that can talk to the database. And the only publicly accessible endpoint is the web app. So it gives you a nice secure baseline to start off from. And it's not something that you would need to go and interact with 8 different pieces of the portal to do. Some people might already be familiar with this because we have a separate template that is just web plus database. But this is a pattern that we're doing right now with database, and we're trying to find ways to expand it so that we can also bring other services that are commonly created or used with web apps along. So you can imagine Redis cache, the option of having a cache, either if you're going to use it for a session state or if you're going to use it as a database accelerator. Or, for example, if you want to configure right out of the bat a load test for your app, being able to do all of those things at once is pretty convenient. And it also guides you through a configuration that will work from the start. So you can spend the time debugging your app and not your infrastructure, etc. The other one that I wanted to call out is this is just a security posture thing. So if I have, for example, a Linux web app, let me find one real quick, and I go to configuration, you will see this new toggle that allows you to control SSH. So by default, SSH is on. You can SSH through your app using the CLI or the Kudu console. But if you don't want to have that option, you now can administratively disable it. So if I set it to off and click save, then either option to SSH into the app will be locked down. So this is, for example, if you want to lock down your production app and you don't want people making changes to the file system or installing dependencies through SSH, you want everything to go through CI/CD and scripts, you can disable it here. On the other hand, you might want to enable it on your staging environment where you want to do debugging and stuff like that. So you can turn it on or off, and you can also control it with policy. And because it's part of config, you can express this on your ARM templates or whatever automation you're using to explicitly set it on or off. And by the way, this is, again, one of those little features that Denver has been working on in the background, apart from all the Java excitement. Anything you want to add to that, Denver?
I think you covered it pretty well.
Awesome.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about the new portal changes.
So then I guess quick segue. Let's talk about Java, Red Hat, JBoss, etc.
Yeah, I can start just by talking about Java in general on App Service.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of the key word here is, I'd say, flexibility. We don't want to restrict you on what you can do or what you can use. I mean, of course, you can put anything in a container, but on Java SE, on App Service, you could run really just about anything as long as you can get it in a fat jar. This could be a Tomcat embedded application. This could be a Quarkus app. This could also be a Spring Boot application, Spring Boot running Tomcat embedded. There's really endless possibilities here for just about anything, as long as you can get it running in that fat jar, as long as it does in fact actually function. And that's completely aside from the code apps like Tomcat and like JBOSS EAP, which the question about does App Service come with Jakarta EE or something similar? Yes, actually the application that we're going to be deploying today, or migrating and deploying really, is a Jakarta EE app that can be deployed to a Jakarta EE compatible environment like JBoss EAP on App Service. So the answer to the question is yes.
Yeah, so there you go, Ambu. Hopefully I'm saying your name right. Yes, you can run Jakarta Java EE apps on App Service, and we're going to see how we do that right now.
Yep, that's actually a great segue. So I'm going to start sharing, unless Byron, anything else?
No. Go
or are we good to go?
Yeah.
Right, let's go. Share this screen over here. Let me know when it's up for you. Here we go. I believe that's the correct screen.
There we go.
Okay, we're up. So this was the Jakarta EE app that I was just talking about. And this is the one that we're going to be working with for this little migration demo. I mean, the goal here is just to move a basic code app like this sort of standard demo for JBoss EAP being the cool store, which operates just like you think it would. It's got cart services, shopping cart, checkout, orders, all your various different things that you might want in a cool store where you can buy Red Hat related things. And this code is available. It's online, public, in GitHub. We can include the link somewhere, I'm sure. If you want to mess with it, practice, or even just migrate your own off of a VM or on-prem on the app service, which is what we're going to be doing for this. But before we go on, I do want to give one quick note here that there's going to be no database involved today. The database that this thing uses is just in memory for now. And the reason is that database migration could be its own demo entirely. And I think hooking up a database to a migrated JBoss EAP application could make a great additional community stand-up or demo, but for a different, another session of this. So,
and there's different features and flexibility that let you have your code on the cloud and still have your database on premise. If you're in that kind of like step where you're in between migrations, right? We have this thing called hybrid connections that let you basically tunnel from the cloud locally in a secure way to continue to query your database. So, if you're in the middle of a migration where you've only moved the code, that's also supported. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of content that we can add there, or we'll share some links about hybrid connections as well.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, as long as you do it right, you can talk to your database on-prem or in the cloud without any issues. So with that said, let's move on to really the next step, which really for migrating a JBoss EAP application or really any Java application to App Service, there's really, I'd say, 4 major steps. Starting with discovery, you need to figure out which app you're going to migrate, which in this case is just this one. But again, that can be a larger issue if you have a whole suite of applications that you may need to migrate. There's tools for that like Azure Migrate for Tomcat applications, but for JBoss, nothing just yet. But the next step is really assessment, because your app might or might not be entirely cloud ready. And there's a really great tool from Red Hat called MTA, Migration Toolkit for Applications. Microsoft, we have contributed to this tool. to help do source code analysis and cloud readiness assessments on any application you may have, as long as you have the source code for it. And this is specific to JBOSS EAP applications, but as long as you have the source code, MTA can inspect it, analyze it, and give you app service specific recommendations to make sure that you're completely ready for your migration. And this tool is really great because it's just a CLI. It's super easy to use, and being a CLI tool means that you can script this out if you need to do bulk cloud readiness assessments. You could do as many as you want at any given time with this, which is super helpful for bulk cloud readiness assessments leading into a bulk migration of a whole number of applications.
Yeah, and the pattern that we usually see people do is they start with one app, they learn with that one app, but then they're like, okay, how do we do 10? How do we do 100? And that's why having the ability to bulk process is key.
Exactly. Yeah. How do you scale it up? Which in this case, actually, I can switch over to the CLI just so we can see it real quick. That is here. The CLI for this, if I move this up here so we can see it, it's just a CLI tool. All you have to supply to it is, the CLI binary itself and specify your input, which in this case, our input is just this cool store, Jakarta EE cool store, which is all of our Java code. It'll go in and it'll look and make sure that everything in here does in fact work on app service. And if I were to run this, it will tell me what I'm doing, tell me what Java version I'm using, and eventually it'll tell me exactly which stack it's looking for in particular, what our target is. Because we can specify our input just fine on this thing. And input-wise, keep in mind, you just need the whole directory containing everything. And that can mean absolutely everything. Not just one portion of the application. It does have to be able to see everything, because it's going to check, and specific to app service, it's going to check to make sure, is there any sort of incompatibility here? Is there anything that is not going to work? Is there anything that you might want to fix too? It'll provide recommendations for things that are not required, but might be really helpful, might be optimizations, might be potentially even cost-saving optimizations for the cloud, because there are some different things to keep in mind when you're actually migrating an application to the cloud.
Yeah, and that's where we kind of like start to blur the line between just the lift and shift migration to very gentle modernization of the cloud, which is modernization of the app, which is finding those low-hanging fruit things that you can do that are not necessarily even code changes, but just to take better advantage of the fact that the app is now running on the cloud, right?
Exactly. Yep. And what app service is really great at is those Java monoliths, those really big Java applications packed into one gigantic executable. Could be a fat jar, could be something else. Taking and shifting those things to the cloud to take advantage of the cost savings, the maintenance time saving of letting us handle all the patches for you. And actually now we can see here, we have the ability to check for specifically Azure App Service as one of our migration targets, which when we run this, it'll inspect every little piece of this code, check everything that it's doing to make sure that it does in fact work. I've already run this, so I'll get out of here and go to our results for it.
Yeah, so we're doing the cooking show example, right, where we just put this in the oven and we're taking the results out of the other oven, because it takes about 10 minutes to run, give or take.
Depends on the size of your application. It depends on the amount of code it needs to inspect and analyze here. For this store, or this application, the cool store, it's about 5 minutes, give or take. Keep in mind, I'm running this on my little laptop, so it's not super beefy or powerful. Your machine might be a lot better. But for larger applications, it can take some time, which is why it's something to set, let it run, come back to it later, and then see your results. And inside here, we can see all of our results for, notice, this is okay to show you a whole host of different applications. We only have one in here because we're only working with one app, but this is made for bulk migrations, as in you can scale up really easily using MTA. So anyways, let's take a look at what it found for us. It'll give us all of these different incidents, story points, all the different things that it finds. In our case, there's a bunch of optional changes we could make, some of which may be helpful, some of which, I mean, no need. The important ones here are cloud mandatory. If there's anything cloud mandatory, those are changes that absolutely have to happen before you can migrate your app to app service. That absolutely has to happen.
What would be an example of like a cloud mandatory change?
A cloud mandatory change would be something like database authentication, for example, since we already mentioned that. If it's trying to reach out to an on-prem database and MTA finds that in the source code and says, I can see that we're reaching out to this database, we need to make sure that you're going to have access and connection to that network-wise in app service. We need to make sure that you've actually handled that change. And it'll flag it for you, tell you, hey, be sure that you have this set up first before anything else can happen here.
Awesome.
So these we won't look too much into because there's so much in here, but notice it can give you really great, really detailed information on this as far as exactly what's going on and specifically which ones impact exactly your migration target, in this case, app service, exactly what the issue is, how it's categorized, how much effort is presumably involved in making the change, and what the potential impacts of this thing could be.
So it goes down to telling me like the file and the place where I'm using it and why the pattern that I'm using it is wrong, which takes a lot of the guesswork out of it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it tells you exactly where to find these things too, which is super helpful for somebody going in and actually modernizing this app or making some changes that are cloud mandatory. It can tell you exactly where it found the problem, which is a huge time saver.
And I think the other thing that's worth calling out is that this is not just random rules. This is actually like the App Service product group spent some engineering time working with Red Hat to provide this rule base, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yep. We did contribute directly to the app service specific rules. Since we know, JBOSS EAP on app service is a migration target for people moving off of on-prem VMs, wherever they're hosting their JBOSS EAP applications, they may want to move them to app service.
Yeah, and you're basically benefiting from the 10 plus years experience that the team has of running apps on the cloud at scale, and what are the patterns and issues that we see with customer code time and time again, right? So that's really the like a way to summarize all of that experience is creating these rules.
Exactly. Yep. And assuming that we've made all the changes we need to make here, that in this case, we don't have to make any to our code, but of course, if you run into code changes that you need to make, you can go and find the specific file, make those exact changes. Saving huge amounts of time looking into this.
And you would iterate, right? So, you go, you make a change, you run the assessment again, you hopefully see the number of issues go down, you keep running until you get to the point where, okay, yeah, this is ready to roll. Let's go to the next step.
Exactly. Yep. You just keep going, iterating on this thing, leverage the experience of all the engineers who contributed to this tool for app service. And once you end up with a graph that looks like this, where everything is optional, there's no cloud mandatory in here, then you're good to go. You're good to migrate. But really, before you migrate, the next step is setting up an enterprise environment. And there's a really great tool for that called the App Service Landing Zone Accelerator. This is an open source collection of Bicep, ARM, Terraform templates that can help you deploy your enterprise environment seamlessly and easily. Being open source means that if you don't have a perfect template or you don't see a perfect template for you in here, if this architecture isn't exactly what you're looking for, you can always fork the repo, modify the templates yourself, and end up with something completely custom, exactly the way you want it, and enterprise ready. These are really great templates that have had a lot of time and effort put into them to make sure that they are your secure baseline for multi-tenants, for example, or your secure baseline for ACE. In this case, go ahead, Byron. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, I was going to say, if this is like the first Java app or the first app that you're ever deploying to App Service, this is definitely overkill. But when you have like a security architect, you need to go through a security review. You want to make sure that you're creating that secure boundary. Like this is the perfect starting point, right? You're starting from a known secure what's it called template that that has the best practices and the scalability and the infrastructure that you're going to need built in and ready to go, right? So you can always modify it, you can add more components, or you can use it as a building block, but choose what part of the journey you're on. You're beginner, you can do the stuff that I showed you at the beginning where you're just creating the app with the database. You're doing a big enterprise migration where you need to have multiple VNets and different connectivity and public and private endpoints, etc. Then the landing zone accelerator is where you want to go.
Exactly, and that's a great point. For just a test run, migrating one app, oh yeah, absolutely use the portal, set up the application nice and easy, and then make your deployment just to give it a test drive. For actually putting a real enterprise environment out here, this just saves a bunch of time and effort. And even for testing this out, if you don't want to fork it and try to modify it first, I mean, this deploy to Azure button is really great and takes you straight to the portal and walks you through exactly how you'd configure this thing, exactly how you'd set up this environment using all the parameters that they currently have available to you. In this case, the secure baseline multi-tenant accelerator here, but there's other options as well. You can always modify, change, update. You can even edit the template directly from the portal here, which again, probably not recommended for making any major edits, but for minor changes, quick things that you notice if you're looking at that architecture diagram and you say, yeah, I don't need this, you can cut it out pretty easily here. And if we were to walk through this and give ourselves a migration workload effectively here, we have all of the different available options for configuring every last piece of this secure baseline for multi-tenant applications. And every little piece of this is customizable. Again, if you need even more, I mean, in this case, I don't think I'm even going to put a jump box in here, but if you need even more, you can always make little modifications on the template directly from the portal, just for testing to play with it, or you can fork the repo and make major changes if you want to take this as a baseline and then completely re-architect the thing to fit, your enterprise environment. You can do that too.
Yeah,
I mean,
the cool thing about ARM and templates in general is that you can check them in, right? So you can have the template that is like, here's the dev environment, execute this, or here's like the actual production environment or staging environment, and you can check them in and you can control the changes there. Just being able to have that and making sure that you're starting with a known working piece, I think is key. Like for me, always trying to build something from the blocks where I don't necessarily know if it's going to work sometimes makes me feel like I'm wasting my time, but being able to start with something that I know is going to work and then adapting it makes me a lot more efficient.
Exactly. And yeah, it's, adheres to the old, engineering saying, which was told to me for the first time by one of the best engineers I've ever met, who's here at Microsoft, actually. He said, make it work, then make it better. It's a great way to make it work and then make it better. And this can take some time to create. I know we're not going to go through the complete deployment, again, a little more cooking show magic, like Byron said earlier. But we can take a look at what would happen when we deploy all these resources, whenever we see what it ends up actually deploying for us. And we end up with something like this, a full enterprise environment readily available to us with our app service, with our staging slot, application insights. We can have, AI services, all kinds of crazy things set up for this whole enterprise architecture that we saw in the diagrams before on GitHub, completely ready and deployed for us. Nothing's running in it yet, but it's ready for us to use whenever we need to, whenever we want to deploy our app to it, whenever our app is ready to be deployed.
Okay, so to get everybody caught up to where we are, so we did we found the apps that had to be migrated. We looked at one app and we got it to the point where it was ready to be migrated. And now with the landing zone, we're setting up the environment where the app can be migrated. So the next step would be to actually migrate the app into the landing zone, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, really, we like to think of it as a 4-stage process here. Discovery first, find the app or the list of apps that you want to migrate. Assessment, assess your apps for cloud readiness. This is, in this case, using MTA. For non-JBOSS applications, there's tools like Windup and AppCat that can do that same thing for you, which if you saw the MTA, Windup and AppCat look very similar. Then you would upgrade your application. If you need to make any changes to the app to make it cloud ready, stage 3 is upgrading it. In our case, we're okay. But in a lot of cases, you may need to make some minor changes, just tweaks to the app to make it function, and to make sure that things like database connectivity, for example, aren't lost. And then the last stage is your migration, which involves what we just did here of setting up our enterprise environment and then ultimately migrating our application, deploying it to this new enterprise environment. And doing that deployment is what we're about to do next. So if I hop in over here, we'll go over here. If I hop in over here and pop open my terminal because we're going to need it. Here we go. Now you can notice that I'm on my POM XML, and that's going to be important for one reason, and that's because before we can run our deployment, whether it's a deployment to just a single app service that you've set up for testing this, or to our landing zone accelerator in this case, you'll need to run this command. This maven config effectively is what we're doing. And we're playing with the Azure Web App Maven plugin here because it pre-configures, it does a lot of the work for us with setting up this POM file. But it doesn't do everything. And that's why you can see I'm specifically in here on my POM file, because you can see where these changes have been made. And really, what's really important here is to specify your resource group, which again, you can grab this from either the single application that you deployed, or your single app service that you deployed, or your, in this case, our landing zone accelerator, the app name, your subscription ID, which I've blocked out just for safety here, just to be sure. Your pricing tier, which keep in mind for JBOSS, right now I believe they're all P3v3s, or PV3, not just P3v3, and your runtime.
But this might be a good segue. We're working on having JBOSS available on additional stacks, on additional SKUs, right?
Yes, yeah, additional SKUs incoming soon. So you're not just on PV3s for JBOSS, but yes, multiple additional SKUs incoming relatively soon here. So exciting news. And once you have all of this, once you have major modifications, really just these lines here in your configuration are the ones that'll need to change. Resource group, app name, subscription ID, pricing tier, and runtime. Now keep in mind, depending on how you have, in this case, I'm using VS Code, depending on how you have it set up and what plugins you're running, some of this might be filled in for you, especially if you're authenticated to your Azure account. And it knows what you're trying to do here. It may be able to fill some of this in, but if not, you'll need to fill all this in yourself. And after we run this config command, we get this POM file, we fill it in, we make our changes. The next step is to deploy it. And you can do that with the nvn package command. And as long as you have the Maven plugin installed for Azure and for App Service, you can just deploy it directly from Maven. And in this case, I'm skipping our tests because this is just a demo. You may not want to do that in a real enterprise environment here. But this will package your app, build it, and then handle the deployment immediately after as well. And if anything goes wrong, you'll get console logs about it in here and in the portal.
And right now you're doing this so it's a one-time step, right? But we also support CI/CD integration. If you're running Jenkins or any other tooling around your build and deployments, you can also do that, right? It doesn't need to be a manual process.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You can script all of this out. You can use Jenkins, Azure DevOps, GitHub Actions will actually be doing, that might make another good demo, is setting up GitHub Actions with, honestly, it could even be this JBOSS EAP app for how to automate your deployments, rollbacks, just a whole DevOps, demonstration here. But yes, it's super easy to link all that together. In this case, we're just doing a single deployment, but again, CI/CD fully supported in the vast majority of flavors here. So let's assume that we've made our deployment. Now the deployment can take a couple minutes, so this is a little more cooking show magic here. And after our deployment occurs, we end up with our JBOSS EAP demo on Azure websites, meaning that it's running on App Service, and we have our functioning EAP application. We can play with our cool store. We can do all the things we do. Remember, just in-memory database, but that's effectively a successful migration from just a standard Jakarta EE or JBOSS EAP cool store application, which is just a code app, could be running anywhere, VMs, on-prem, wherever you might have this thing. And we discovered, assessed, upgraded, and then ultimately migrated it over here to App Service, where it's now functioning and running for us. And so, if you need to, oh yes, go ahead, Byron.
What would be your next steps, right? So we've gone through this, we've done it for one app. What's next?
Next steps, as far as once you deploy something, it's pretty good generally to monitor it, see what it's doing, make sure it's functioning properly. It could be another assessment, just a sanity check to make sure the migration went well. And that could involve looking at something like App Insights. You could look at Azure Monitor, has a bunch of different tools for that, inspecting your log stream. There's a lot of places you can grab this information from, even some of the native logging that you can grab just in your terminal from a Java application like JBOSS EAP. You can see it right there, which is great for, if you're actively developing this thing, you want to make a deployment, check things, make sure it's functioning properly. Usually I'd say the next step is monitoring the application, making sure that everything went smoothly with the deployment, because you can see that this one appears to be nice, but sometimes there's those underlying issues that don't just show up when you look at a website or a web page or a web app like this. And it might take a little closer inspection into the logs, wherever those logs may live.
Right. So, sorry, just quick question. We have another question in the chat, which is the SKU means JBoss version, and I think if we go back to your config file, that's where we were seeing that.
Yeah. So SKU is not going to be JBoss version. SKU would be, I believe, pricing tier.
Yeah. So that is the underlying VM. That is the size of the underlying VM that App Service will provide to your application.
Yes.
And then as far as JBoss version, I think there's some updates for that coming as well, right?
Yep. Yeah. EAP 8 is incoming, I believe. Yeah, I don't know exactly when that's going to appear for us here, but EAP 8 is coming, as well as Java 21.
Yeah, I think that's just waiting on the deployment rollout to complete. So it should be Q1 this year, like calendar Q1, before it's done.
Before we have, all the pieces in place for new Java version and new JBoss EAP version as well. Which, yeah, great question. SKU is not JBoss version. JBoss version is separate entirely from the SKU. The SKU is, you can think of the SKU as, like Byron said, the VM that's underlying, that's running the thing, and associated with the SKU is an associated cost too. Bigger SKUs, bigger money.
Okay, so then, next steps could be monitor your application. If you have more applications, then, scripting that and automating the process so you can do your bulk migrations. And then you start getting into the lightweight modernization, right? Where you start using App Service features where you don't necessarily need to make a code change to get a benefit. So
exactly.
An example of this would be, for example, you were talking about monitoring the app, right? So just being able to have all of those metrics and all of those logs flowing, and setting alerts and stuff like that on top of that. Is something that doesn't require you to do code changes, and is pretty much built into the platform.
Exactly. Stuff like this that I'm sharing right here, this log analytics workspace, which this, I mean, yeah, you may have to create it if you're working with just a normal app service, but with Landing Zone Accelerator, this is made for you, linked up entirely, completely ready to go out of the box. And yeah, like Byron said, there's no code changes required for this at all. This is already consuming your logs, already looking at them. And you can query this thing in a bunch of different ways to try and find out exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about this. You can literally write a query where you as a app owner or developer, the error messages that are bad. So you can literally write a query that says, check the logs. If you see this error message or this error code, send an email or trigger this automation. So that's really the powerful thing here, where you're making the platform work for you.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and this is all built in. You don't have to do anything except write your query and then just link it up to the right alert system, or even like Byron said, automation. If you want to take a automated remediation task or do something else, that's completely possible as well. All from really just from the portal here. It doesn't require any major code changes or anything.
Yep.
And another thing that I'm thinking of that may be helpful is that if we go back to our GitHub for Landing Zone Accelerator, oops, went back too far. It's laid out pretty well for us step by step, but usually the next step is setting up GitHub Actions. And like we said, monitoring is helpful, and that's probably really the next step once you deploy something, to make sure that it works, that it functions properly, that you can consume the logs, that you can tell when something's going wrong, if and when something does go wrong. But I'd say the next step is really looking at improving your DevOps, getting some CI/CD set up, and in this case, configuring GitHub Actions, which for Landing Zone Accelerator, we have a step-by-step on how you might want to configure GitHub Actions for it. Makes it really easy to at least get to a state that like we said, is functional first, and then you can customize it to exactly your use case, whatever CI/CD DevOps use case you might have. I think GitHub Actions is a great place to start, since we have this step-by-step for Landing Zone Accelerator, which, notice if you see the instructions here, they're very similar to setting it up for your app service, for your application that's being deployed as well. This could be a really helpful sort of, let's say, starting point when it comes to setting up this CI/CD and all of your deployments for both your environment and your app service itself, or your application itself.
Awesome. Any other closing statements, Denver? I think we're at the end of your demo, right?
Yeah, this is it. But closing statements wise, we're really excited with the way JBOSS EAP is going on App Service right now. Lots of improvements incoming soon. Clustering capabilities available as well for clustered JBOSS EAP applications, which is huge. And constantly being improved. So we're looking to make it better. We're looking to help out our customers here, and same thing mirrored for Tomcat stacks and for Java SE as well, with incoming features for improvements on database connections as well. So since databases were mentioned, I thought I'd throw that in there.
And if you want to see a real Jakarta app running on App Service, actually the Jakarta generator is powered by App Service. So, this is a real world app used by millions of people, hosted on the platform, and, powered by the work that we do. So, this is a good way to show that it's for real. With that, I think just a couple of things. We have the next show is going to be March 6th. It's going to be a little bit earlier in the morning because we're accommodating some of our folks that will be joining from India. And we're going to be talking about Node and debugging Node applications on App Service, and some of the new tooling and live debugging experiences that we've added to the platform to help specifically Node developers. Be sure to check out the App Service blog. Denver is going to drop in a little companion blog post to this live stream where we have links and some of the stuff that we talked about, so that you can go and find that GitHub repo or find all about the landing zone accelerators, and you don't have to screenshot and type the long URL by hand. You can find that there, and you can also reach out to us on Twitter. So Denver is actually one of the persons behind the scenes manning the Twitter app service. So this is coming to like real product people, and we're not gonna necessarily help you debug your application there, but if you have questions, we can point you to the right docs or feature requests, stuff like that. Make sure that we channel it to the right place. And thanks a lot for joining. Also, thank you for Haley, who's always watching out for us. Make sure we don't make complete fools of ourselves. We're only allowed to be partial fools, not complete.
Self-sufficient.
Yeah, exactly. Anything else, or I think that's about it.
Yeah, nothing else for me. Just be sure to watch the Twitter for incoming updates on the latest and greatest for App Service as well. App Service blog, tech community, Twitter. They'll all end up on the Twitter at some point. So it's a great place to check out where the latest and greatest is coming from.
Well, thank you very much, Denver, and all the folks at home. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks, everybody.